Welcome back to another episode of the Lender Podcast. I'm Bryce Matheson, and as always, this episode is brought to you by Lender. Lender is a loan management software tool designed to help you with every aspect of your business, from origination to servicing to payoff. Lender helps you with document generation, helps you with collecting monthly payments, dispersing monthly payments to your investors, taking in new loan applications, giving your borrowers a portal that they can log into, giving your investors a portal that they can log into. Pretty much every aspect of everything that you do inside of your lending business can be done and facilitated through Lender. You can check that out by going to joinlender.com. That's LENDR, joinlender.com. Now, on to the episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Lender Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Bryce Matheson, and today we are greeted by the presence of Mr. Shane Powers. How are you doing, Shane?
Good. Great to be here.
Thanks for being here with us. So let me just preface this a little bit because I am stoked for this episode, because this is going to be one of those things where you finish listening to this episode and I just know already you're going to go need to take some ibuprofen because you're going to have a headache with information overload, because Shane is a wealth of information, a treasure trove of information. And the reason I know this is because I recently with the Hard Money Mastermind that I went to a couple weeks ago, Shane gave a presentation and I left that meeting with very much a headache because I was like, I do not fully comprehend everything he's talking about, but I absolutely see the value in it. So first and foremost, Shane, go ahead and introduce yourself, kind of give your background working through Guitar Center, where you're at now. And then I definitely want to go over some of the stuff that you talked about in the mastermind, because I think it'll be super valuable to a lot of the audience listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a marketing consultant for probably like the better part of a decade out on my own, and worked with a variety of clients across all kinds of industries. In 2021, I got recruited to go work on the e-commerce team for Guitar Center, and really was like hired as an SEO, search engine optimization manager, and kind of very quickly got promoted to having a team underneath me, and was doing some paid social and organic social, and within a relatively short period of time ended up being the acting director of e-commerce for their music and arts brand and their woodwind brasswind brand. So had a bunch of marketers underneath me, had a couple of paid search and some merchandisers, people with like music background that like understood individual instruments and all that kind of stuff, and managed upwards of like $5 million a year in paid search budget. It worked closely with this. There were basically like two headquarters, like one out in Westlake Village, kind of out near Hollywood, and one on the East Coast in Frederick, Maryland. And so I worked with a bunch of really smart SEO guys out in that were based in LA. And I did that for a couple of years. And I mean, I love music. I've been playing music for a really long time, and like kind of like loved the blend of like learning.
Very cool.
And paid search stuff, but left to go work for a solar company for about 2 years, and managed about $1 million in ad spend, and turned it into about $10 million in net revenue in that 2-year period. But have since gone out on my own, and now I'm helping hard money lenders generate leads and drive more traffic to their website and that sort of thing.
Amazing. And I was going to ask, what was that segue? Like, how did you go from Guitar Center with instruments and then moving to solar, and then why hard money? Because hard money in and of itself is not a very sexy topic. It's not something that people like wake up and be like, I'm going to run a marketing agency for hard money lenders. What was that segue?
Yeah. I mean, really, it was the Hard Money Banker guys. So I've known Chris and Jason. Hard Money Bankers is headquartered in my hometown in Columbia, Maryland. And I crossed paths with them because of an agency that I was working with in like 2016 or 2017. A girl who was my colleague left the agency we were working at and went to go work for the Ed Reed Foundation. So Chris and Jason's buddy, Glenn, is the executive director of the Ed Reed Foundation. He's worked with Ed for a number of years. And this coworker of mine was working for the Ed Reed Foundation and kept messaging me, asking me about like, hey, can you help me set up this Facebook ads campaign? And pretty soon that turned into like, hey, will you come get lunch with my boss? So when I met Glenn, like we hit it off right away. And then he was like, you got to meet Chris and Jason. So a day later, I'm in the office meeting them. Come to find out that Chris and I had a bunch of friends in common. He was literally college roommates with guys that I grew up with. And
no way.
And we had a whole bunch of friends in common, had never crossed paths. And a week later, I'm doing freelance work for Glenn and then doing a bunch of stuff with Chris and Jason on their podcasts, on their ads. And I've had a good relationship with them ever since. So when I left Guitar Center, I was kind of, it was one of those things where a buddy of mine came and was the head of operations for a solar company, and they kind of needed somebody that had my exact skill set. We talked about what they were trying to accomplish. They were trying to get more leads for their business. They were growing and, we're buying a lot of leads from, same way that hard money lenders buy leads from bigger pockets or connected investors. There's a whole bunch of third-party lead companies for solar who generate the interest, then sell it to like 5 companies. And
sure,
the companies run out and compete with each other for trying to close that deal. So they basically wanted to have an in-house guy that did that for them. So I kind of came in and they had all of the systems set up in a way that was like just teed up for success for somebody like me coming in and generating a bunch more leads.
Yeah. So you just needed to add some fuel to the fire.
They had a call center. They had people calling leads. Like the second they came in, they had all of their leads hooked into Salesforce and had, a bunch of very good processes already existing. So
love it.
I just kind of came in and kind of poured gas on that fire. And we, Chris and Jason, I talked to the whole time I was at Guitar Center and at the solar company. And, we kind of talked about the mastermind and how many people had similar needs where they had either like grown their business entirely from like word of mouth or going to meetups or like hustling. But then once they get to a certain point, maybe they didn't have a website, or they had a website, but they weren't updating it regularly. They weren't, doing anything with their content that would drive more visitors. So we kind of started talking about like, what would it look like if you came to one of these things? And then Charleston was the first one. So
was the thing, huh? Okay.
But we're about to do one in June in Columbia that I'm excited about. I'm going to give kind of the same presentation, but tweak it for a slightly different audience. But yeah, it's yeah. So I'm just
so the reason I wanted to have you on here is because I think the majority of the listeners to our podcast are in a very, very similar situation. The hard money lending business is, as you know, is very heavy on lead gen, whether that's lead gen for new loans, new borrowers, or on the investor capital side. And so it's very much this like teeter-totter seesaw thing where you've got to make sure that you like are perfectly balanced. Otherwise you'll have too much capital and not enough loans to go out, or vice versa, So let's start from the very, very beginning. Let's say, for example, somebody that's listening does not have a website. They've got a couple, maybe $1 million in capital. So they can realistically fund, depending on where you live, 4, 5, 6 loans using that. What would be the first thing that you would recommend that they start with?
I mean, I think it starts with a website, and it's interesting because I've talked to a bunch of lenders who either like don't have a website or haven't updated it in a number of years, which I think is a pretty normal thing if you're out hustling at the meetups and you're getting business that way. You don't need the website for the activities that you're doing. But I do think that
right.
once you get to a point where you've grown to a certain point, you kind of have to replicate those things that you're doing at the meetups digitally. So in an instance like that, where it's like, maybe it's $1 million and you can fund 4 or 5 loans a year, what I would do is I would have a basic kind of funnel type landing page website where even if it's only one page, it basically talks about who you are, the areas where you lend, and has a contact form as a bare minimum. Then I think starting out with that, if it was me and if it was my business, which is kind of the way that I always try to look at it, I would probably be going and doing stuff on social, experimenting, trying to build a following, like the stuff that you do with Reels, as a starting point for somebody that's in that position. Because I do think that there are lots of guys that I've run into that can build from 1 million to 5 million with nothing more than a 1-page website that has has some kind of intake form. It can either be like a contact form that just says name, phone number, email address, and then you're calling them back right away. Or it could be a full-blown loan application that you direct people to in the event that you're talking to them. The kind of interesting thing that's happening right now, not to get kind of too far ahead of where we're talking, is that all of these companies, Google, Facebook, TikTok, they all have platforms that they control that are driven by algorithms where they change the rules pretty consistently. So like the thing that you're doing today may not work anymore tomorrow. And how do you stay on top of that is the thing that I would be concerned about. So a big thing that's happening with search is what's referred to as zero click. So the idea that like you type a question into Google answers the question inside of the search results, and nobody ever has to click through to a web page in order to get the answer. That's been happening.
You're specifically talking about the AI summary by Gemini, correct?
And before it was the AI summary, it was the knowledge panel. So like if you said if there was a football game on, you're like, what's the score of the Eagles game? Like it would put the answer to the question inside of the results, so you never have to click through to NFL.com. So they've been ticking away at this for a long time with like informational answers. But with AI, they're starting to go considerably further. And, not to get like way out in front, but there's a guy that I follow named Michael King, who's a really sharp dude, in the SEO world. And he just wrote a long article about a thing that Google just announced 3 or 4 days ago called AI mode. So, at Google's annual event, they, announced what will be like the next kind of, iteration of Google search. And there's a lot of SEOs that are really nervous about what AI mode will do to visibility on the internet for companies. And, there is a bunch of this stuff that we may talk about today that like in 6 or 12 months may be somewhat outdated just because of how fast
totally irrelevant
a bunch of this stuff is. Also a whole bunch of the principles associated with like how you get Google to index your website and understand who you are, what your organization does, what areas you serve, is a bunch of the same stuff that informs the AI results, but it is starting to get less and less clear about like, is that information going to be synthesized by the AI and then presented in a way where they're using your information, maybe citing you, but like nobody's clicking back to your website anymore. So like, that's a thing that's going to upset a whole bunch of the search landscape in the next probably 24 months. And, it really is kind of there's a lot of people arguing about what's going to happen next. And, in those instances, I look for guys like, Michael King. I look for guys like, Rand Fishkin, who was the guy that started, Moz and now, runs, the audience research tool that I'm dropping, is right on the tip of my tongue. But, I look for people who have been doing this stuff for a long time and demonstrate like that they're able to think critically on highly complicated subjects. And, it's just one more of those things that like the thing you're doing today may not be effective.
It may not be relevant.
Anymore very shortly.
If I had to venture a guess, and feel free to call me out, in 12 or 24 months, if or when I'm wrong, I would venture to say that local SEO, and when I say local SEO, I specifically mean like building your website in such a way that targets to Omaha, Nebraska hard money loans. I would venture a guess to say that will be fairly stable for the near future in relative to anything else outside of like the knowledge base panel or the AI generated answers. I would say that my personal guess is that would be rather insulated for a little bit longer than all this other stuff. But again, that's my pie in the sky guess.
I think I agree. The couple of things that I think are evidence of that is one of the things that's been happening recently with local Google businesses. So like used to be Google My Business. Now it's Google Business Profile, but like the map pack results in local search. We did loads of this stuff with Guitar Center where we had to manage locations all over the country. We had to do it at scale. We had a variety of tools and agencies that we worked with for all of the different things that we did. For most of that, like the local search and the map pack showing up.
Can you quickly explain what you mean by map pack?
Yeah, so the Google result that shows the it's normally a grouping of three, where it's a business name, it's the reviews, and you can basically like click on the button for their website, click on a button to call them. Where the intent is local, so like, you know, specifically hard money lender in Omaha, Nebraska. If we're talking about that as an example, what Google's going to do is they're going to say the intent behind this is that it's a local search. We're going to elevate businesses that meet that criteria. And for a long time, there was a variety of like, you know, people who would game that system by making fake entities in order to rank in those things and generate phone calls for clients and all that kind of stuff. Google has been combating that for years and years and years. Fairly recently, I don't know when this change happened, but at some point recently, they started making it that you have to have a physical business location. You have to have a commercial office space. You have to film a video in order to get verified. So you have to pull out your phone. It can't be edited. You have to walk into the thing. You have to show your logo on the door and jump through all those kind of hoops in order to show Google that you're a real business. This has literally led me to have conversations with hard money lenders in the last 2 or 3 weeks where we've discussed, if you don't have a physical office, but you want to rank locally and you can afford to, and the average amount that you make on a loan, let's say, is somewhere in the ballpark of $10,000, that I think that it is a no-brainer to have a physical office space, be pumping effort into those Google business profile listings, because I think that it can generate enough phone calls, enough traffic through to the website, and enough like hyper local awareness.
It offsets the cost. Absolutely.
That it offsets the cost, like probably like 10x is the cost, depending on.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I had to do this exact same thing. And you and I had this discussion before. So I rented, and currently do still, a small office space for $250 a month. I went onto Etsy. I had to get my logo cut out in vinyl, you know, stick it on the door. And you physically have to like take your phone, like you said, you click a button, say start recording, and Google wants to see the cross street. So you have to walk outside and you have to film the physical street sign that says, yes, we are in the corner of Main and Hughes. And then you pan around and you show your signage on the front. You walk into the door, you show your desk, you show your paperwork, you show your loan system on the computer. You have to be very apparent that this is a legitimate business. And like you said, spending $250 a month to bring in $10,000 in profit, it's a no-brainer, but it's absolutely a huge shift mentally and physically in the way that it's worked in the past.
Totally. I mean, I think you nailed it. So like, if from having paid very close attention to like a variety of the things that Google has done over the last, like, I don't know, probably 15 or 16 years that I've been doing stuff related to SEO, like what that tells me is that they're putting a slight barrier to being able to be verified as a local business. In the event that you can be, that barrier now exists for your competition. It would also, I think, suggest that like it's probably not going away in the next, like, let's say 12 to 24 months, meaning that like for local intent queries, Google probably imagines that elevating the map pack with the reviews of the business, the contact information, and saying these are legitimate businesses that had to jump through a certain level of hoops is probably the best experience for the searcher. And I think all things being equal with some, exceptions, I do think that Google leans towards benefiting user experience, especially in this instance. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, but I mean, like in the back of my mind, it is also like, okay, well, it's another thing we got to pay attention to, like with AI mode, like how's that going to affect local queries? I don't know.
So now when you say local SEO, my mind jumps a couple places. I think of the Google business profile, but I also think of your physical web presence, such as your website, obviously. What different things can the listeners do to increase their local SEO? Like back in the day, for example, you could just game the system and you could add a whole bunch of like junk garbage keywords. Like, for example, people would put the word hard money lender and then they would change the text to be transparent and they would plaster it all across the background so that when you went to the website, you wouldn't physically see it, but you would rank higher because you had 2,000 search results on your website for hard money lender. Obviously, Google's gotten smarter. That's not the thing anymore. But what can you do currently today to increase your local SEO as far as like a web context goes?
If most of the people that we're talking to were like lend generally in one area, And let's just say it's a state like, so, Chris and Jason operate in Maryland. We do a lot of stuff around Maryland. With Maryland, you got basically Baltimore and DC. There's a variety of searches for, generic terms like Maryland hard money lenders, fix and flip loans in Maryland, all that kind of stuff. What we tend to do is we will either experiment starting with paid search campaigns. And if you're not spending on paid search, there's a variety of other ways that you can do it. But like, we would target those exact match phrases, see if they convert, see what the clicks cost, like make a guess at what we think would be relevant to that person and what they'd want to do, submit a form, read reviews, basically kind of landing page best practices around content. What kind of questions are most of them going to have? What are the terms on your loan? Like how many points? What interest rate? Like when does it have to be paid off by? Are there any areas that you don't lend in? Are there any type of deals that you don't fund? So on a bunch of those Maryland pages, we talk about like bridge loans, construction loans, fix and flip loans, with the crux of the messaging on the page all being towards like, if you're looking for a hard money lender or a hard money loan in Maryland, here's a whole bunch of information that will either like answer your question or B, like get you to take the next step, which would be either filling out a form or submitting a loan application. If you're making stuff and waiting for it to rank in Google, it can take a while. And like, depending on how good your website is, depending on how much you've been like building backlinks to your website and how strong your web presence is, like, it may take like a month or two for like the thing to start generating impressions. But if you got, $100 to test, you could probably pay for, 10 or 12 clicks around the term that you're looking for, get a bunch of data on that in the course of a day or a week or a month, then sort of pause that stuff and use the information and the data that you learn from it in order to, okay, we're going to make pages that answer these queries. So when I talk about local SEO and we're talking about something like Maryland, I'll have one page that's focused on like Maryland hard money loans or Maryland hard money lender. I'll have a variety of like contextual stuff that may be grouped inside of that page based on what we believe the query intent is, meaning that like if somebody's typing that in, we're having to kind of use empathy and put ourselves in the shoes of the searcher and say like, how are we going to successfully answer the thing that they're searching for? And the couple of ways that you kind of discern that is you can go to the results that already rank. You can use something like ChatGPT to do a gap analysis between all of the things that rank for that search phrase and get it to give you a list of all of the things that they don't talk about if you want to increase the likelihood that you're going to rank for that term against people that are your competitors. But the combination of those things, meaning like a map pack, an organic page that's about that topic, and maybe a paid ad would mean that like in the event that somebody types in the word Maryland hard money loan, that the hard money bankers guys may have an ad that addresses that, may have a map pack result that's where they're in the top 3 that has reviews and their phone number and a variety of things, and then may have an organic page that's pushed way down the page in 2025 that literally says, here are a bunch of our recent Maryland hard money loans, one in Reisterstown, one in Baltimore, one in Bethesda, so then you're just, the game is really like imagining what's appropriate to that, what would answer that question for that searcher, and then building stuff that answer it.
Well, it's genius. When you think of it that way, like a lot of people build something, throw it out into the ether and said, okay, maybe this will work. But the thing is like, Google is incentivized to show the searcher the most qualified result. And so you have to kind of flip the script and be like, let me build this in a sense that I can answer a question that somebody may be potentially searching for. And if you are the most relevant result, then of course you're going to show up higher than somebody who's not. Now, as I'm thinking about that, talk to me briefly about the Google Search Console, because I think what a lot of people do is they build a website and they, it's like, if we build it, they will come. And that's not necessarily the case. You can build a website, but if Google doesn't know about it, it's not to say that it can't make its way onto Google. That certainly has happened in the past, but there's a way to speed up that process and that indexing process so that Google is aware, and that's through the Search Console. So for people who are not aware of the Search Console, what is it? How do they get listed? How do they get ranked? What tools are in there? Give us everything.
Yeah. Well, so it's one of the first things that I do with anybody that I work with. Let's start by saying this. Google Search Console is, a free tool where basically you verify your website, which is normally like you go into your hosting settings and put either a snippet of code on your website, or you verify in through like the DNS settings, and it tells Google that you own it. And then what Google Search Console is basically like I think it's like an 18-month trailing. It only goes back so far. So if you don't have it set up, you'll set it up and it'll start showing data, and then it'll show, once the data is 18 months old, like the oldest stuff falls off unless you're doing something to store it. But in essence, what you can do is you can submit a sitemap to Google and say, here's all the pages on our website, go crawl it. In the event that there's an issue with a page being indexed, you can identify it inside of the dashboard, fix the problem, then request that Google re-index either that individual page or the new sitemap. Once you get that stuff done, the thing that's most powerful, I think, for me and the stuff that I do is it'll show you every search that your page is generating impressions for. So if we use the, Maryland hard money lenders or Maryland.
And again, not to cut you off, but to explain to the audience, what is an impression? We're using these terms. Like, I want to be very, very, very basic.
So an impression would mean that somebody has searched for Maryland hard money loan, and our Maryland hard money loan page was triggered in the results. Doesn't mean anybody clicked. It could be like, result number 92 on Google's list, but we generated an impression for it. So then a lot of search engine optimization is looking at, what are we generating impressions for? What's the page about? Are people clicking on it? Are they clicking through at a rate that is good? And if not, like, what can we do to fix that? So with something like Maryland hard money loans, if that's what the page is about, that's the query that we're ranking for. In that instance, like a low click-through rate, because it being a local query and the map pack, we want the map pack to be ranking for it. I think you're going to be hard pressed to make an organic page on your website rank for that local term when so much of the attention lives in the map pack. So in that instance, I would not be concerned with a low click-through rate. If the impressions are generating, it tells me that Google understands what that page is about, and they think that we're relevant for that query. And then I would kind of work at increasing the likelihood that we can get somebody to click on it. So in that instance, that page maybe not earning the click, but it being highly relevant to our audience who's searching for the things that hard money bankers do. We are making sure that we're optimizing the Google business profile for that term. We're also making sure that we're running ads targeting just very specifically that term. And in the event that that person clicks, we're pushing them through to a landing page where we're trying to convert them into a loan application, because one of the things that's the most powerful about search, especially if they're searching for the thing that you do, is they're kind of the lowest point in the conversion funnel. They're the closest to buying. They're actively searching for the thing that you do. So you're not going to persuade them into like that hard money is the solution to your problem. They're already looking for what you do. So that tends to be, in my experience, if it's not super, super competitive, it tends to be the way to get the highest return on your ad spend and on your efforts, with this kind of stuff.
Love it.
So with Google Search Console, a lot of that data is, this is maybe a bad example, but like, let's just say for argument's sake that the Maryland hard money lender page is triggering a Maryland fix and flip impression, but we don't have a page built out for Maryland fix and flips. I'd probably build out a page that focuses on that as a term if there was enough volume and if the query wasn't effectively answered by what that page was about. So I use it as decisions to inform like what to target with ads, what kind of content and landing pages to create, how to interconnect those things via either internal linking or like, if we're building out a bunch of pages at once, like, thinking about these clusters of keywords, we want to put these contextual things together, interlink them to these other contextual things so that Google can crawl all of it easily, so that Google sort of has as clear of an understanding about what Hard Money Bankers does, what areas they serve, what customers and past clients say about them, and all that kind of stuff. It can be overwhelming and daunting if you're just starting out, but at the core of the thing, it really is like aligning your digital presence to what you're most likely doing at a meetup and with your hustle stuff that gets you from 1 million to 5 million. It really is very, very closely aligned.
So basically to summarize, I would, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would say If you do not have a website, build said website. Make sure that the pages on your website are hyper specific to target local results, and then upload or add/verify your website inside of the Google Search Console to say, hey, we are specifically focusing on hard money loans in Boise, Idaho, or Nebraska, or wherever. That is marketing/local SEO 101. Let's now jump to like the 201 version. Let's talk about paid traffic. We say we got our website, everything is squared away. We still need to now generate a higher volume of leads by pushing people to our website. What would be your first anything about that? Say I'm a complete newbie novice. I know nothing about paid ads, paid search. Now what?
My first thing would be treat everything Google tells you with a level of healthy skepticism. Like, that would be like starting off
broad match versus phrase match versus exact match versus
that's yes. The place that I start. So, the difference between broad match, phrase match, and exact match played a massive role in the past where like you could effectively do a lot of exact match ad targeting, but Google has been pushing everything towards broad match. And a lot of times the results for small businesses are bad. So exact match would be that like, we only want our ads to show for people who are searching for Maryland hard money loans. If you turn that into phrase match, it might say, that's close enough to Maryland fix and flip loans that it's okay. The problem that Google has started to do is that they're kind of lumping more and more stuff into phrase match and way more stuff into broad match. And this is something that the guys with Hard Money Bankers dealt with, maybe like inside the last year or two, was everything going to broad match. It was triggering a lot of queries for like payday loans or like, crowd funded like personal loans. And they just started getting like loads and loads of irrelevant, spammy clicks, submissions. So we basically had to like turn a bunch of that off, scale all the campaigns down, pick the most relevant keywords, which are mostly like hard money loan, hard money lender, fix and flip, construction loan, bridge loan, like, all those kind of like core hard money related stuff. As like the big initial group. Then for everywhere that they serve where there's adequate search traffic, we make exact match, ad groups for Maryland hard money loan, Maryland hard money lender, Maryland fix and flip. And we target only those things. And the reason being that like Google will tell you that they're killing it with the broad match stuff when they're sending you nothing but loan applications for payday loans. Now that's not what these guys do. It's explicitly stated that that's not what they do on the website. But when you flip that switch, Google just, for whatever reason, sends you all of that traffic. And lots of those people like don't read through the details and they submit. And then we're swimming in a sea of data that is highly irrelevant. Like we can't make decisions based on it. It's the wrong people, and none of that stuff is good. So that would be the first thing that I would say to anybody that was dipping their toe into paid ads from a hard money lending perspective is keep it on exact match, even if it looks like that it's nothing, because the more that you broaden it initially, the more you're going to waste ad spend, the more that you're going to basically bury your data in a whole bunch of irrelevant clicks. And then,
well, and to follow that up too, you have to remember that Google is incentivized to spend your money. They want you to get the most results as it can so they can spend the most money. And so inside of the Google Ads dashboard, there's like I think they call it recommendations, and they say, hey, you're not doing this. Hey, you're not doing that. And it's like this grid of like 25 different things that you're like, hey, you need to do this, 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 and this. The thing is, newbies will go in there and like, oh, well, Google says I should do this, so I should do it. You go through and do it. And then all of a sudden you're spending $10,000 a month and you are getting garbage junk results. Right. The other thing that I was going to say too, and this is a gotcha that I recently discovered, is at the campaign level, there is a setting that you have to go into to turn off searching as broad match by default. You have to physically go in there and turn that off, because I personally have gone in and was putting in all my keywords, right? Like I want to show for hard money loans in Idaho. The problem is, even though I put it in quotes to be a phrase or exact match, after I did that, it would auto default back to broad match. Yes. So just some additional things to keep in mind.
And I mean, even non-novices. So the exact thing that you explained, Chris from Hard Money Bankers had been running ad campaigns with Google for a number of years, literally had Google reps calling him and being like, hey, we see optimizations you should do in your account. And then they're like, turn this thing on, turn this thing on, turn this thing on. And what happens is everything gets pushed to broad match. Like the quality of traffic goes down significantly. The level of spam submissions goes through the roof. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I went from having a thing that was working to having a thing that's not working anymore. And all I did was get my optimization score to 100%. Literally every account that I'm in is probably somewhere between, this one's like 43%. This one is 67%. Like pretty consistently, my optimization score, if you're looking at it from the outside, like this one's 82.
Looks like
that's probably the highest. And I mean, I get probably 2 or 3 emails a day from Google reps for the accounts that I manage, and it's some partner in India that is tasked with getting us to agree to turn on broad match. And I respond to all of them that I won't turn on broad match. I won't do this. And if you still want to talk, feel free to send me an invite. And pretty consistently, they never do.
Yep.
It's
so another thing that I have found too is, I can't remember what it is, but I believe it's called display networks. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. I turned display networks off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's a bunch of settings. And again, it's just another Google recommendation to get you to spend more money, and it brings in garbage results. So I can't remember exactly what it's called, but basically there's like main Google search, but then there's also display networks. And there's one other one. I can see the checkbox. I can't remember what it's called, but basically you're on somebody else's website and you see like Google ads or search results in the sidebar. In my experience, it's just another way to spend money, and they do not convert.
I'd say like pretty much I agree with everything, with like one small caveat. And when I went to go work at the solar company, they had an in-house guy who was handling pay-per-click, and he and I worked together for 2 years. So I kind of came in, asked him a variety of questions about what he was doing, like went through the account, like reviewed it, said, I think we're going to turn this off, and I think we're going to turn this on, and I think we're going to stop spending stuff here. We're going to, increase spend here. One of the big things was that there was a desire to get leads as inexpensively as possible. So they put an artificial cap on the cost per acquisition and say, like, we don't want to spend more than $40 for, somebody submitting like for a free solar analysis. And realistically, I think like one of those submissions or appointments was probably like $150 or $200 per, like at that time. So artificially like setting that number low, and then having something like the display network on, in my experience, is going to flood your account with spam. So like, it's going to basically say like, we're trying to get this activity to happen. And because we can't for what it actually costs, we're going to push all of our resources over to display, and we're going to get loads of clicks. And the way that you kind of troubleshoot that, or like you kind of reason through like the issue is like, you look at your Google Analytics and you see that a bunch of those clicks, the page doesn't even load. Like the average engagement time on that page is less than a second. It's like, it's not relevant traffic. And, there's a lot of these things that look and feel the same. And if you just put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's searching for what you do, nobody's clicking that and navigating away in less than a second if they're a real human and they're genuinely searching for what you do. So when we turn all that stuff on and we turn on the super relevant stuff, we only bid on those clicks. We get a clear idea about like what that cost per click roughly is. We also can watch on the page. And if you use something like Hotjar, you can make a heat map and like watch a recording of what the person did. And then you use that to inform like the user experience. And did they have trouble finding what they were doing? Did they hover around a certain place longer than other places? If so, and that's halfway down the page, maybe we need to move that stuff up the page. But all of those things, like once you get past the first pass of bad traffic, in my experience, seeing that stuff with the display network, I have almost exclusively turned the display network off and not turned it back on in the last 3 or 4 years. There's a couple of random instances that I use it for, but mostly I don't.
It's a good point. Basically, I've had enough exposure and experience with the Google Ads platform that like I know probably a little bit more than the average person, but a lot of it in my experience comes down to like, let's start small let's gather some data and then let's expand from there, rather than having this guns blazing, like, let's throw a bunch of money at it, because Google will absolutely spend your money.
Yeah,
And
they'll
more
take all.
often than not, they'll take all of it if
Yeah.
you let them, and they will show no mercy. There's just so many things inside of the Google Ads platform that it's just there's a lot in there. It is, I wouldn't say cumbersome, but there's just a lot to learn. There's a lot of settings, and if you don't know what you're doing, you can inadvertently spend a lot of money. For example, very few people look at the negative keywords list. You can go in there and you can say, hey, in the past, I have searched, or I have shown in search for payday loans. We don't do payday loans. So what you would do is you go in and put in a negative keyword for saying, hey, if we ever match for this result again, do not spend money on it because it's not qualified to us. We don't do payday loans. So there's so many little things in here that there's a lot of nuance to it. And so, Shane, I want to be conscious of your time. I don't want this to go on forever, but I do definitely want you to pitch your services, because I think a lot of people, rightly so, should be somewhat intimidated by Google Ads, just because there's a lot to it. If you don't know what you're doing, you can waste a lot of money. So
Yeah.
I 100% see a lot of value in partnering with somebody who knows what they're doing. And on top of that, Shane specifically caters to hard money lenders. That's all he does. He does not run Google Ads for beauty products and cosmetics. He doesn't do it for landscaping services. It is specifically for hard money lending. So all that to say, Shane, if people want to reach out, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you? Pitch your services. What different products do you offer? Are there different tiers? Basically, I mean, sell us your stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is relatively new. I basically set up the entity about a month ago, like kind of in line with the Charleston thing. And let's say this before I make the pitch. One extra thing tying into the negative keyword thing. One of the biggest factors that I see with a lot of people who do Google Ads but don't get it set up right on the front end is you got to be tracking conversions the right way, and you have to be feeding that data back into Google. So like if we just imagine that Google is a big search engine that's driven by an algorithm, we want to be sending the right signals back to Google. So in the event that we get somebody to submit a loan application with HMB, like that's the thing that we're measuring for. That's the thing that we're optimizing for. And we're doing a variety of things to like feed that data back into Google to tell Google that this is the thing that we want to have happening, so that every instance of us having that conversion event firing is hopefully teaching Google who the people we are that we want submitting to us. And then there's a variety of things that we do afterwards. So with all that stuff being said, I got a website up. So my company is Powers Capital Marketing. And it's just powerscapitalmarketing.com. I am just starting out, but I'm in the process of working out reselling subscriptions to Go High Level, which is basically like a landing page and a CRM platform that people may be familiar with, they may not be. One of the reasons that I'm using it is because all of the instances where I set up ad campaigns for people, I want to set up offline conversion tracking with Google. Go High Level has a pretty good way of doing that kind of out of the box, putting a couple of snippets of code in that when a form submission comes in to fire this information back into Google. So that, I think, is one of the things that increases the likelihood that if you're spending money on ads, that you'll get a return on your ad spend. So basically the way that I work with clients is that I try to find opportunities for the clients to make a return on the investment as quick as possible. I don't do stuff on the front end like we need to change branding, we need to rebuild your website, we need to do a variety of things that can get very expensive, but don't always lead to like positive financial results for the company. So what I tend to do is I go, all right, let me see what assets you got. Let me figure out like what you're doing that works. And then based on my experience with hard money lenders up to this point, like let's create systems that will consistently generate you highly relevant clicks, like submissions based on those clicks in the event that we have the landing pages built well. And then the idea being that like, if we can get a good borrower in the door, that could mean multiple loans over the life of that person being in your database, which would mean a high return on ad spend. So those are a bunch of the things that when I was working at Guitar Center, like we were always trying to turn $1 in ad spend into $7 or $8 or $9 in e-commerce revenue. For a bunch of the lead generation stuff, we did a similar thing. For the solar company, we were trying to be at a 10x return, meaning that when we spent $1, we got 10 back. So I kind of always take that thought process for paid search with If there's low hanging fruit, we want to go out and grab that and generate returns as quickly as possible and as consistently as possible. I haven't done it yet. I'm anticipating. I've had multiple conversations about it. A lot of guys that are thinking about these things are then thinking about, well, if I get a bunch more loans, I'm going to need to raise capital. There's been a bunch of things that we've done with HMB. It's not exactly raising capital because they've not been in a position where they need to raise it, but it's been for attending things like the June event. And we do a lot of that stuff in kind of a completely separate vein on Facebook, where we target people based on their interests, based on their activities and their behaviors. And we show them things and then push them to a landing page that gives them a compelling offer that will increase the likelihood that they convert. And then they get into the HMB sales system and either get a phone call from Dave or one of those guys in order to, try to sell them on whatever the thing is that we're selling. So I try to balance both of those things, paid search and local SEO, and then like going out and generating demand to specific people on Facebook. And, I've got 3 or 4 clients right now and, trying to take on more and, building some systems that will hopefully I've actually got a couple of guys that used to work with me at Guitar Center that focus a lot on like automations and just like a lot of like kind of good digital stuff that are helping me in a freelance capacity, on the nights and the weekends when they have time. So maybe before long, I'll have a couple of the Guitar Center guys working for me, but
I love it. Well, perfect. Shane, seriously, thank you so much. Like I said, if anyone's listening and you need help with marketing, Shane is the go-to, because every time I talk to him, I learn something new. I hope your head has exploded because, like I said, when I when I first met Shane, I had a headache walking out of that room, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's absolutely attributes to his expertise. So again, thanks to everyone who's listening, and we will catch you again on the next episode of the Lender Podcast.